Good morning and welcome to this individual executive member decision. My name is Callum Wynham. I'm a Democratic and Electoral Services Specialist. I'm clerking the meeting. Making the decision today is Councillor Ian Shenton, who's our Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. From the officer side of things, we have Ed Shaler, who's our Head of Enforcement and Safety. And we're also expecting at some point Neil Allen, who's the Head of Legal Services. So with that, I'll pass over to Ed just to run us through the report and the recommendation.
Yes, good morning. So the purpose of this executive member decision is to authorise officers to implement an enforcement policy for the Environment and Safety Department in compliance with the Regulators Code. This is under Section 22 of the Legislative and Regulatory Reform Act 2006. In summary, the report introduces a general enforcement policy as to how officers in the department are expected to conduct investigations, inquiries, and decisions that they may make with regarding enforcement action. The report and enforcement policy also introduce updated requirements in relation to environmental offences, which is under Appendix 1. Appendices 2 to 6 relate to housing-related offences, specifically the smoke alarm and carbon monoxide regulations, that's Appendix 2. The energy efficiency regulations, that's Appendix 3. Electrical safety standards in the private rented sector regulations, Appendix 4. Various offences under the Housing Act 2004 as amended by the Housing and Planning Act 2016, that's Appendix 5, and the Tenant Fees Act, which is Appendix 6. The policy also goes on to introduce formal policies in relation to advertising causing an obstruction on the highway. This is Appendix 7. A policy on interference with public rights of way, Appendix 8, and it makes a brief mention of policy on enforcement against high hedges in Appendix 9. These are the principal enforcement powers in the Environment and Safety Department. Although it is not exclusive, there may be other enforcement powers which are available under other legislations, which, if it was necessary to establish a new policy or procedure, we would bring separately to the executive member for decision at a future date. So the recommendation is that the executive member should authorise officers to implement this enforcement policy. I think it will be an important document which will give clarity and transparency to members of the public, businesses, visitors or residents who may be affected by officers carrying out investigations or making decisions in relation to any of their enforcement powers. And it would also provide important guidance for officers as to how they are expected to proceed in their investigations and decision making. We do also ask the executive member to agree to some small amendments to the enforcement policy, which, if executive member agrees, will be recorded in the decision record. I will read out those amendments now for the record and for the benefit of anyone who wishes to know what those amendments are. The first one is in Appendix 7, I believe, not Appendix 6, Callum, as I may have indicated earlier. Appendix 7, the advertising boards. This is page 36 of the agenda bundle. The wording of the amendment is to make clear that this policy is designed to deal solely with the use of the Council's powers as a highway authority under the Highways Act 1980, associated legislation and case law. It does not cover the regulation of advertisements generally and specifically under the Town and Country Planning Control of Advertisements regulations and associated legislation, which are dealt with separately and referred to here as the advertising legislation. Any permission or enforcement action under this policy is without prejudice to the Council's powers under the advertising legislation, and consent given under this policy should not be inferred to be deemed consent under the advertising legislation. The second amendment is in Appendix A, Public Rights of Way, page 41 in the agenda bundle. It should be made clear that an informative to the local land charges record for the property as a disputed piece of land will only be made after the householder has been informed of the council's intention to do so and has had an opportunity to make representations. And finally, for record in the decision record, is to make reference to the point on page 7 of the agenda pack, which is the financial implications of arising from the enforcement policy, that it should be made clear that income from financial penalties may contribute to service budgets subject to the legislative power, but the use of financial penalties is not designed to create income. The budgeted figures merely reflect anticipated likely income, which may be more or less. Financial penalties are designed to encourage compliant behaviour and deter non-compliance. So that concludes my introduction.
First of all, my thanks to you, Ed, for the comprehensive and detailed paper before us this morning. And it is valuable, of course, to have an unambiguous enforcement policy which can be applied without prejudice. As a result of that, I agree the recommendation, and I also agree the amendments as proposed.
Thank you very much. I'll just grab that. So just to clarify, that the first amendment was to Appendix 7 rather than 6. That's fine. Okay. So if I just read out the original recommendation, which is set out on agenda page 5, it is that the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure authorises the Director of Place and Growth and officers delegated in turn by them to implement the Environment and Safety Department enforcement policy contained as enclosure 1 to this report, including service-specific enforcement policies appended to it, and to publish the policy on the Council's website. And the small amendment we're making to that is the wording which says now including service-specific enforcement policies appended to it as amended by the executive member at the meeting as set out below. And those 3 amendments have been detailed by Ed. They are in relation to Appendix 7, advertising boards, and Appendix 8, public rights of way, and then just a clarification really, rather than an amendment to the financial implications section of the report. So subject to that, Ian, are you happy to make this decision?
Yes.
So we'll just quickly sign the decision sheet. Thank you very much. So the amended version of the decision will be published on the website today, and subject to the standard call-in period, the decision can then be implemented. And so with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much.